So my talk revolves around emotion-aware learning. So particularly, so I focus on boredom emotion. So before I start my presentation, I thought it would be good to introduce myself. So my name is Yuvaraj. So I'm an education research scientist associated with SOLAC Science of Learning Education Center. So my primary research interest, mainly focuses on developing pattern recognition algorithms with applications to biomedical signal analysis. So meaning that the signals which are generated from human body, say for example, electroencephalogram, electrocardiogram, galvanic skin resistance, etc. So my current project, mainly focuses on affective computing in education. So meaning that investigating students' emotions using pattern recognition algorithms and physiological signals. So this is the overview of my talk, so which is organized into 3 key sessions. First, I will begin by discussing the crucial role of emotions playing in the learning process. So next, I will introduce the concept of affective computing and its application in education. Followed by, I will present my ongoing research on boredom-aware learning, which focuses on recognizing boredom using multimodal physiological signals. So let's talk about emotions and learning. Okay. So as you all know, emotions are an essential part of every human being. So it influences humans' behavior, thinking, ability, attention, decision making, resilience, etc. So in education, emotions and learning are inseparable, right? So emotion can both enhance and interfere with learning, depending on which ones are driving and coloring the experience. So therefore, it is of great value to explore emotions of students when they are in the learning process. So this figure illustrates how emotion influences the learning process. So as I mentioned to you earlier, emotions act as the starting point, shaping the learner's engagement, attention, and readiness to process information. So for instance, positive emotions such as curiosity, enjoyment, enhance focus, while negative emotions such as anxiety or boredom can disrupt the student's learning process. So this emotional state directly affects, whether it is positive emotions or negative emotions, it directly affects students' attention, determining what learners notice and prioritize. Ultimately, these processes, attention, memory, culminate in learning outcomes, so indicating that a supportive emotional climate facilitates a better comprehension, retention, and application of knowledge. So in short, emotions are not separate from cognition. They are integral to attention, memory, and overall learning success of students. Let's discuss about affective computing and its application in education specifically. So you may know, affective computing is a field of study mainly focuses on enabling computer machines, to understand and respond to human emotions. So first, affective computing systems. Affective computing systems can detect, interpret, process, even simulate human emotions. So this means the system aims to understand the feelings such as happiness, sadness, or frustration. Second, these systems can interpret a person's emotional state and adjust their responses accordingly. Say for example, a virtual assistant might speak more calmly if it detects stress in the user voice. So affective computing is an emerging field. These days it is an emerging field that mainly integrates various interdisciplinary fields such as computer science, psychology, or cognitive science, to create a system to capable of detecting or recognizing emotions and responding to human emotions. The term affective computing was coined in 1995. The term was first coined in 1995 by a professor, Rosalind Picard. So according to him, affective computing mainly refers to a computer's ability to recognize user's emotional state, express its own emotions, and responds to user emotions. So in summary, affective computing, the machine interprets the user's emotional state and adapts its behavior accordingly, so providing an appropriate response for those emotions. So in general, the research content of affective computing primarily covers 5 aspects. So the first aspect is the fundamental theory of emotion, which currently relies on the discrete emotional model and the dimensional emotional model from the field of psychology to define various types of emotions. So the second type mainly involves collecting emotional signals such as text, speech signals, facial expressions, and physiological signals to establish corresponding data sets. And the third aspect is a sentiment analysis. So meaning that, which utilizes the machine learning and deep learning algorithms to model and identify the emotional signals. And the fourth aspect is multimodal fusion, meaning that which leverages multimodal emotional features, so meaning that which uses multiple modality signals and using a fusion algorithm to enhance the performance of the emotional state model. Finally, the fifth aspect is generating and expressing emotions, process that enables robots or machines to convey emotional states through facial expressions. So in this figure, you can see a number of articles published in this field. So as is noticed here, you can see a steadily increasing trend in the affective computing domain, so exhibiting an overall growth trend despite occasional fluctuations. So this figure shows the affective computing processes. So affective computing processes mainly involves 4 stages. So the first stage is to capture the data set from humans, meaning that, say for example, facial expressions or physiological signals or text. The second step is the feature extraction, so meaning that, so with the help of the machine learning algorithms and pattern recognition techniques, so try to extract some important information from the collected data sets. And the next step is pattern recognition algorithms. So that is using various machine learning algorithms to understand the emotional patterns from the extracted features. And finally, evaluation. So using several performance metrics, the researchers used to evaluate the developed model. Okay, so one of the most common performance metrics is accuracy. So this figure illustrates the progress that affective computing research has achieved from its origin in the 90s to the present. So if you see here, it begins with emotion recognition technologies and advanced toward emotionally intelligent human-computer interaction application in gaming and healthcare. So this is how affective computing research progress throughout the years. So current research on affective computing mainly focuses on explainable AI and the development of emotionally intelligent systems. So as I mentioned to you earlier, affective computing, continues to be one of the most actively researched topics in education. So over the last decades, so specifically educators have studied different aspects of affective computing in education. Okay, so here I have highlighted some of the research involved affective computing processes in education. So say for example, some researchers studied the role of teacher in managing students' emotions. Others studied the effect of gender and influence of shape and color on emotion and learning. Okay, so this is one of our recent papers from our team, which provides a landscape of affective computing in education. So this systematic literature review is employed to address several research questions on various aspects of affective computing in education. The following are some of the major findings from this literature review. So the first is the distribution of number of research papers by year of publication from 2010 to 2023. So in this literature review, we mainly focused on the research papers published on 2010 to 2023. So the figure shows that a number of affective computing studies in education domain, gradually increasing. So as you see in this figure, the highest number of publications were recorded in 2020 with 20 studies. So in the reviewed studies, we also observed that the most common research purpose, okay, so we investigated the purpose of affective computing research in the education domain area. So the most common research purpose is to design, okay, so design emotion recognition methods and expression systems to recognize the students' emotions, followed by examining the relationship among emotion, motivation, attention, learning style, and cognition. So here I have highlighted some other findings. So in general, in affective computing research, emotional states are discussed under categorical and dimensional emotion. So from the literature review, we found that majority of the affective computing studies in education mainly focused on a dimensional theory. Yeah. And we also investigated the different measurements used to understand the student's emotion in affective computing. So as you've seen here, researchers used different measurements such as physiological modality, text, facial expressions, oral, etc. So here you can see number of studies used those modalities. So if you see here, my research mainly focuses on investigating emotions using the physiological signals. So this table presents the frequency analysis of emotion in each affective computing studies. So as you've seen here, the top emotions reported in the table indicate that researchers in education domain are more concerned about the negative emotions. So specifically boredom. So boredom stands in the first position. So we also identified several challenges in affective computing studies in education. So here I have highlighted some of the challenges. So the first one is ethical consideration. So most of the researchers talked about the ethical considerations in affective computing. As you all know, the use of affective computing education raises several ethical implications, so particularly concerning to students' data privacy, consent, and potential physiological impact on student. So we also found that researchers faced challenges with integration. So meaning that integrating affective computing systems with existing educational technologies presents several challenges. So including technical integration, privacy, and security. So we have identified almost 10 to 15 challenges. So here I have presented the most significant challenges here, the top 3 significant challenges here. Okay, so let's talk about my ongoing research, so boredom-aware learning. So boredom in learning context. So as you all know, the academic emotion of boredom, interestingly, is one of the most commonly experienced emotion of students, so when they are in the learning process. It is not an emotion to which teachers have paid much attention in the classroom. So boredom can occur during the learning process or when there is no activity to engage. So in education or learning context, so boredom can disrupt learning by blocking a focused attention, so resulting in a lower engagement and motivation to learn. So in the literature, boredom has been described as a silent emotion when compared to other emotions, say for example anger, because it does not always disturb the classroom. Boredom has also been described as a neglected emotion, a poorly understood emotion, received very little empirical attention. So this makes a boredom elephant in the classroom. So this is one of the most interesting book which describes the boredom emotion in a very brief manner. So it describes the various components of boredom, including the affective components, psychological components, cognitive components of a boredom emotion. So here I have highlighted some of the impact of boredom emotion on learning specifically. So numerous research have been conducted on boredom research. Okay, so say for example, so the author Westgate explored the relationship between boredom or cognitive engagement and academic performance, and showed that boredom reduces a cognitive engagement and leads to lower academic outcomes. Okay, so this is one example. So all these studies clearly demonstrated that boredom can have a negative impact on learning. So what would be the ideal solution in order to reduce the feelings of boredom when the students are in the learning process? So one possible solution could be a computer-based system to recognize the boredom emotion when the students are in the learning process. So you might think, is boredom always bad? Right? So the answer is no. So boredom is not always bad. It can have both positive and negative impacts on learning. Okay? So my research mainly focuses on negative impacts. Okay? So here I have highlighted some of the positive impacts of boredom emotion on learning. So boredom could lead to increase the creativity of the student, self-reflection, productivity, motivation for change. So it has both positive and negative impacts on learning. So physiological signals and emotions. So physiological signals are nothing but the signals which are generated from human body. So in general, emotion recognition methods can be categorized into 3 groups. So people use psychological approach. Say for example, using self-report to understand the student emotions. The second approach is behavioral approach. Researchers use students' facial expressions to understand the emotions. The other approach could be using the physiological signals. While all these approaches have their own advantages and disadvantages, So physiological measurement is considered to be particularly objective. So because of these three reasons. So one of the major benefits of using the physiological signals generate from central nervous system and autonomic nervous system are it largely involuntarily activated, which cannot be triggered by any conscious. That's number one. And number two is they are same among people with different cultures, language, and gender. It cannot be imitated easily. So this figure shows the various physiological signals generated from human body. Okay. So this is one of my ongoing research projects, so automated boredom detection using multimodal physiological signals. So this project mainly aims to explore brain-body states of boredom emotion when people experience boredom. So specifically, so the proposed study systematically explores the various central nervous system and autonomic nervous system signals to understand the characteristics of boredom when people bored. In addition to that, so this project also aims to develop a machine learning pipeline to recognize the boredom emotion patterns using different physiological signals. So let's talk about this project a bit. So the first objective in this project is to design an experiment to induce the boredom emotion in the laboratory settings. So for this purpose, so we have used a bored lecturer video in order to induce the boredom emotion in the students in the controlled laboratory settings while recording multimodal physiological signals. In order to identify, the most significant board lecture video, so we have conducted a pilot study. So for the comparison purpose, so we also recorded the non-boredom state physiological signals, so by showing a neutral emotional video clip. So this is how the experimental protocols looks like. So the complete experimental setup is shown here. See, on the right side, you can see how the biosensors are placed on participant during a boredom induction experiment. So here you can see the sample physiological signals recorded during the experiment. So in this research, we mainly focuses on 4 physiological signals: electroencephalogram, electrocardiogram, galvanic skin resistance, and the eye gaze data. Okay, so here I have highlighted some of the key findings from this study. So as I mentioned to you earlier, so one of the aim was to develop a machine learning approach to recognize the boredom patterns from the multimodal physiological signals. As you may know, the performance of the proposed framework is mainly measured in accuracy. So if you see here, so among the 4 modalities such as EEG, eye gaze, electrocardiogram, and the galvanic skin resistance, so we achieved the superior performance using eye gaze data. That's number 1. And number 2, so we also found that when you combine different physiological signals, it can lead to the improvement of machine learning models of performance. So we also investigated the underpinning neural mechanisms of boredom emotions, and we identified that boredom is associated with distinct neural patterns. Specifically, there were significant changes in the higher frequency EEG bands. So this is how the proposed machine learning framework looks like. So those who are interested to know more about this study, so you can refer to this paper. So this is an interesting findings. So as I mentioned to you earlier, so we achieved the superior performance using the eye gaze data, right? So the finding is further supported by the eye gaze heat maps, which shows a clear visual distinction between bored and non-bored state. So this is bored state and this is the non-bored state, whereby participants are directing their attention away from the video more when bored. It can be seen that the heat map reveals a concentrated distribution of gaze points primarily within the screen area in non-boredom state. So we can also see that the increased off-screen points during a boredom may significantly distracted. You can see here. So here, the focused and screen-bound gaze distribution in the non-boredom state aligns with higher engagement and the attention levels. So here I have highlighted some of the implications of this study. You know, as you all know, so boredom is an important emotional state to be recognized in learning. Okay, so imagine if you have a system that can recognize boredom emotion in the classroom, so allowing teachers to identify when students are disengaged, the teachers can adjust their pedagogical approach to better engage and motivate the learners. So other study implications here. Okay, so in this research, you know, so we used a multimodal approach, right? So the research team is completely aware that, you know, using numerous biosensing modalities in real-time applications is highly challenging. So specifically in the classroom context, you know, due to concerns such as, you know, space, cost, and potential disruption to the learning outcomes. So given these limitations, it may not be realistic to expect full-scale deployment of a multimodal system in typical classroom, at least in short term. So one possible solution is to consider unimodal approach to rely on a single type of sensor. Say for example, in this case, eye gaze, which is performed well in this study, which might be more feasible to implement in a real-world education context. So these two publications represents the findings from this study. So in this study, so we have described the machine learning approach to recognize the boredom emotion, and in another study, so we showed the neural patterns of boredom emotion in an education settings. Yeah. So I take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to my dedicated research team members and collaborators who have contributed immensely to our work in affective computing in education. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time and attention. So happy to answer your questions. Maybe one or two.
How do you recognize the eye gaze that is engaging, and how do you recognize that by eye gaze? This is the prime kind of look or signal for you to see. How do you recognize an eye gaze that is considered as engaging?
Okay, so in our research, so from the eye gaze data, so we have investigated different eye gaze parameters such as saccade, eye gaze, saccade, eye blinks, the frequency of eye blinks, the students, whether the students are eyes closed or open, you know, with the help of all these parameters. So
you give the details rather than general. How will you say that an engaged student? How do you know?
Okay, so when the student eye gaze or away from the screen. Okay, so away from the screen, so we can see the students are disengaged.
I mean, thinking.
Of course, yeah. So we cannot, all the time we cannot see the students are disengaged, but so again, this kind of system can be used as an assistive tool, not to take the final decision, meaning that whether the students are engaged or disengaged.
Do you have a conclusive set of parameters
Come again?
that will pinpoint that this student is engaged?
So again, so we conducted this experiment in a controlled laboratory settings, so as you know, we cannot bring all the physiological equipments to the real classroom settings to do the experiment, right? So in the controlled laboratory settings, again, as I shown in the heat map, you can see how the participants' eye gaze were away from the screen.
How do you define boredom in your study?
Okay, so in our study, so we defined boredom as a lack of engagement.
So is that reported by the subject or is it natural?
Yes, reported by the subject. So at the end of the experiment, so we asked the participant to complete the self-report measures. So whether the video lecturer is engaged or not engaged, yeah.
I see, and you correlate with
Yes, we correlate with the data, physiological data, yes. So in the self-report measures, we have set of questions. So for example,
Can they each watch one video or multiple videos?
the participant watched both non-boredom state video and the boredom state video. So we need the non-boredom state, we use the non-boredom state as a baseline to compare with the boredom emotion.
So in the boredom one, 12-minute one, it was an audio of the lecturer explaining energy transfer. So was there anything for them to actually look at?
Yes, so
Because
the video has
that's why
both
they don't look at the screen.
the video has both audio and visual.
It was audio visual.
Yes,
The
yes.
slide said audio. Okay. Was it done in the same room? Because if there's something else interesting to look at, let's say there's an attractive lady there, I might be watching her even though I'm listening to you. So my eyes may be distracted.
Yeah, so we conducted the experiment in the
Same place.
yes. So again, so this is our first step to, underpinning the physiological responses of boredom emotion in an education context. Yep. So yeah, if there is no question, so thank you so much for your time.